we can start with you just letting us know about how you kind of got started in the creative arts.
I got started at a very young age. I was drawing ever since I was a little kid. I was really into Star Wars and superheroes like Superman. I do remember my father can draw a little bit, and when I was like probably 2 or 3 years old, I kept on heckling him and asking if he could draw Superman for me. And then one day he was like, "Why don't you draw it yourself?" Because he was so flustered because I kept on asking him. And then eventually I did it myself. And my father and my mother saw I had some talent. And maybe it's because my father's a artist, but not professionally trained. And my grandfather's an architect.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think maybe, so there's some of that graphic artist in me. And so, but I went to all my life when I was in elementary school. I drew. I loved comics. In high school, I loved comics, and I went to I lived in San Diego, so every year I would go to the San Diego Comic Con, and I would try to be a comic book artist. I would show them my portfolio. At 16 years old, I tried to become a comic book artist for Marvel Comics, and they were like, "This is pretty good, but you probably should go to school." And then I wanted to be a comic book artist. And originally I was going to go to New York for a comic book university there. But since I live in San Diego, California, my mother didn't want me to go to New York. She's like, "You are staying in California. There's no way you're going to New York." And so I went to California Institute of the Arts. That is the college that Walt Disney started. And I went into the animation program. I went there for 3 years. I got my bachelor's of fine arts, and then I got an internship at Disney, Walt Disney feature animation. I got hired, and I started on Pocahontas. And I worked on Pocahontas, Mulan, Hercules, Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Tarzan. I started from a cleanup artist. That's where you start off and you just clean up the animation drawings. And I worked my way to animator on Treasure Planet. And then I finally made animator on Treasure Planet. But then unfortunately, 2D animation was going away. So they let me go, and fortunately, I got picked up at Nickelodeon for Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I worked at Avatar: The Last Airbender for 2.5 years, and after that, I went to Pixar. I tried out for Pixar twice. The first time I tried to go for Ratatouille, and they did not hire me. So I stayed at Nickelodeon on Avatar, and then the second time I got picked up. And the funny thing is that I heard there was 2 projects that were going on at the time. One was about robots, and the other one was about an old man and a ranger kid. And I was like, "Oh man, I hope I get on the robot movie because that sounds really cool." Unfortunately, I didn't go on the robot movie. I went on the old man and ranger movie, and that was Up. And Up, I'm so grateful that was my first movie, because Up is amazing. And I've been at Pixar now for 14 years. Worked on Up. Last movie I worked on was Toy Story 4, and of course I wrote and directed Float. So
Yeah. Do you feel like your Asian American background at all affected the reason you went into the arts, or your kind of come up as well within the industry?
I think I know for myself as a Asian American, Filipino-American specifically, I know our culture, our parents wanted us to be more like engineers and doctors and lawyers and nurses, and arts wasn't what they were pushing for, because arts at the time, like if you were an artist, you were a starving artist, and there was no career in that. I'm much younger than you guys, so when I was a kid, like in the 70s and 80s, the only cartoons that were out were, I mean, Little Mermaid hasn't even come out yet. There was just nothing really good out. So my parents like did not see that. Well, actually, Filipino Americans did not see that as a viable job to have, is to be an artist or a cartoonist. But my mother saw that I had talent, and she knew that I loved it so much that she actually was very encouraging of me drawing and creating. And maybe it's because that's all I was really interested in. I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to be a lawyer. And I did try up journalism a little bit because I did want to like maybe possibly be a editorial cartoonist at one point, but I just loved comic books so much, mainly because I think there was the San Diego Comic Con every year when I was growing up. I would go there, and those artists were my heroes. So I think that's why I wanted to be an artist. But yeah, like the Filipino in me, the older generation definitely wasn't pushing me to be an artist at all.
Yeah. Do you feel like now, especially with Float, that there's more representation now? It's more inspiring that you're seeing more kids from like Filipino backgrounds, for example, taking up into the arts?
I do. I think it's because, yeah, now I think Disney has had its run a good 20 years now of success. So, and I think like myself being in the industry, parents are looking up to us as a viable job and career. The funny thing is I know I've made it because now I'm getting a lot of notes from aunts and uncles and Filipinos all over the world asking me to mentor their kids. And like, I'm sorry, I don't have time to mentor your kid, but I appreciate that you are starting to see that animation and art is a way to actually live your life and actually have a pretty good one.
Yeah. Do you think your Filipino background has affected your creative process as well? That might be different in terms of like nuances that you see in some of your other colleagues.
Maybe in that I know when my mother had she had a shop when I was growing up. She had a clothing manufacturing shop. She would make clothes, t-shirts, skirts, and stuff. And I saw she had a strong work ethic. Like she worked from 7 in the morning till 8 at night. And I saw my mother do that, like work her fingers to the bone, like she worked hard. And so that's an immigrant life. And so I saw that hard work and I saw that hard work ethic. And so maybe I think that it is ingrained in me because now I know what it takes and how hard people have to work to get what they want. And I know being an Asian American, there are things that I have to work harder at to get because I have to show that I have the talent to pull it off, to do it. And I thank my mother for showing me that the hard work and and tenacity to keep going and keep working hard.
How have you seen the Asian American film industry in Hollywood or in the US change over the last, since you kind of like started your career in animation?
Well, I mean, Asian-wise, I mean, we won last year for the movie, right? The Best Picture. And who would have thought that? Like, you know, and Minari is up this year, and so I think that's a big change. That's only within the last 2 years. Prior to that, I don't remember any Asian movies in the Academy Awards at all, or any Asian Americans for any of the categories.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there are, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. So I do think that now is the time for diversity. Now the mainstream is looking for different types of stories. And last year, the Academy Awards, Parasite won. And now this year, it looks like Minari is going up for an Academy Award. Hopefully, I don't know, fingers crossed. Yeah, I definitely do think, I feel like there's a shift because I haven't seen any Asian American or Asian projects up for Academy Awards. And I think right now, especially with like diversity and inclusion being a big thing here in America, I feel like more studios are more inclined to hear stories from all different types of nationalities, so including Asian. So I think that was a great time, and I'm looking forward to telling more stories.
That's great. How do you? Because we read up that Spark shorts of they're quite big. Oh, thank you. On their diversity program as well. Could you tell us a bit about that and how you've been involved?
Okay. Yes, the Spark Shorts program is set up to tell stories from creators and directors that are usually not on the list to be directors, unheard voices within the studio. So, for instance, Edwin Chang was Edwin was like he was an editor, or he was more of he was in our tech side, and I'm a story artist, and then we had who else Erica, who is more of a documentary person. So I guess what I'm getting at is usually they're tapping into directors that usually don't have that, don't usually get picked for those spots, and for the Sparks program, it is they're trying to do people of color and women to give them a chance to tell their stories.
That's really
and
good.
Since I'm a person of color, they gave me a shot.
We read somewhere that you had originally for Float, you had originally drawn the character as Caucasian, and then switched it to, because it's your story, right? Why do you think that was? Do you think Spark Shorts has kind of like helped you make that switch, or was it the producer, for example, kind of thing?
Okay, in that situation, it was a little bit of both, because it was, like I said before, I originally intended for Float to be Caucasian white characters, and in this situation, it was Jillian Liebert, who is our story manager. She told me that maybe the characters should be Filipino, because the story is about myself and my son, and so I think it's partly Pixar, because if it was my choice, I would have made him white. But luckily, Jillian said that the story is that I was originally going to make them white, and I thought that they should be, because I was thinking commercial wise, that's what people would want to see. And then she had said, well, this is what made me turn. She asked me, how's your son going to feel when he looks up in the screen and those characters are white? And that hit me, because I didn't want my son to think that he wasn't worthy and of a story at Pixar. I didn't want him to think that being Asian was something less. And at that point, I changed my mind. I was like, okay, no, these characters are going to be Asian. They're going to be Filipino. I want the next generation to be able to see themselves on the screen and see themselves as worthy as lead characters in a Pixar film.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's like so nice to hear. I think as well the fact that I think it just hit 20 million views, right? Like it proves that these can also be commercial. Like people of color can be commercially successful.
Yes, because I was like, oh man, I don't know if anyone's gonna. It's one thing when you don't know the numbers, like with Disney Plus, I don't know the numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know how well it's doing. But with YouTube, I'm like, oh wow, this is a smash hit, and this is reaching out throughout the world. And just looking at the comments, they're not talking about the Asian part. They're talking about being a person that's different, and everybody can relate to that. And so I think that's why it's resonated throughout the world.
Yeah. Do you think these platforms are becoming more popular now, like for creatives who are for animators, for storytellers to put their work out, especially people of color? Do you think it's helping them, or it's still more popular to go with bigger companies like the blockbuster star companies?
I think if you don't have access to the big blockbuster companies, I think this is the way to go, YouTube, and things that you have access to. I will say this, my kids, they didn't really care. It's unfortunate to say, but they didn't really mind when it was on Disney Plus. But once it got on YouTube, they were like, oh my God, Dad, it's on YouTube. And I became like a little hero here, but those are my kids. They're like teenagers. I actually like Disney Plus, and my wife likes Disney Plus. So hey, they're just picky.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting that you say that. It's like different markets, I guess, different audiences will resonate with different kind of platforms. Do you feel like when you're writing for certain audiences, for example, or for certain platforms?
Well, I work at Pixar, so I'm only focusing on creating stories that Pixar will do. But after hours, I do write my own comic books, and and my own stories, and those things I just do those. I just tell stories that I want to see, and I'm not really caring about who the audience is. I just want to create something out of me as an artist, because now is my time to tell my stories. When I'm at work, I'm doing Pixar stories, and that's fun, but they're not my stories.
Yeah. How do you feel like animation, writing, and drawing has helped you discover yourself?
I feel like, for instance, Float, it forced me to talk about my son's autism, and it was very cathartic, and I found that I had this strength that I didn't know that I had, because I had to talk about my story in front of hundreds of people, and now millions of people. And in the past, I wouldn't have done that. I would have like at the very beginning when my son was first diagnosed, I probably would have said, no, I'm not going to tell this story. But through this process of making this film, I've done many interviews and I've talked about my son, and I feel a confidence in me growing, and I am grateful that this film was made, because now I get to talk to people like you and people all across the world that went through what I went through. And it's great to spread this message throughout the world that, you're not alone for thinking you're different. And it's a wonderful experience to spread that message.
That's like
Amazing.
so sweet. It's kind of like what we're trying to do here as well, like create this platform for like independent artists and stuff like that. Yeah,
that's great, because then now the whole world will see this. It's a movement now. And it's a movement of like just creativity and love, and hopefully we could share that with everybody, and it's a great feeling. It's really cool.
So not just in film, do you think there's any other kind of industries that are leading the way in terms of like the creative industries, or
in terms of diversity?
Oh man. The funny thing is, now that we're in this COVID times, I'm just locked into my work. I'm not really noticing anything else outside. But I mean, I would like to think all of art is doing that. Music, graphics, movies, comics, books, literature. I would like to think that there's more diversity out there throughout all of the arts.
Yeah. What do you have in the pipeline at the moment as well? I guess, like, do you think you'll continue with
more Spark shorts, films, or are you working on like a big film right now? Or?
I am working on a big film right now, and that is Lightyear. That is coming out next year, I believe. And on my own free time, I am trying to create the next Filipino superhero. So that's on my plate. What I'm trying to do.
Is that going to be like a book kind of thing, or like a film, or?
I don't know yet.
Still in the works.
You could go either way.
Amazing.
Where do you think your kind of story ideas come from as well?
My story ideas,
like
just things I like. Like I said, I like comics, like toys. I mean, I think it's obvious if you look behind me. And then, like with Float, experiences that I went through. I'd like to throw my experience in there to make the stories more authentic. So even with all the stories that I'm creating now, there'll always be a sense of my own personal story in there, so it feels real to me, and hopefully it feels real to the audience.
Do you think there's any Filipino kind of like folklore stories that you've been bringing from your heritage and stuff that comes through, or you'd like people to see?
I would love for people to see. I put it on my Instagram. This Filipino superhero I'm talking about it's called Neighborhood Legend, and the Filipino superhero holds eskrima sticks, and those are eskrima is our Filipino martial art. It involves stick fighting, and people know of it by like Black Widow. Black Widow has those batons and she fights with sticks. Nightwing from Batman, he also does that. So does Daredevil. And that's all great. Even Raya did it in the movie. She had fighting sticks. And I mean, that's great. But I want to see a Filipino-American do that. So I am trying to create something where it comes back, my culture comes back to a Filipino character actually performing and utilizing our martial art.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't realize that's where that like
originates.
Yeah, where that originates.
Yeah,
from.
it's ours. It's
Yeah.
ours. It's a Filipino martial art form.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to tell the story, because I want to reclaim it.
Mhm.
It's ours.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think that's amazing to hear, because a lot of things seem to be coming to light, even in terms of like Cinderella. That story is like technically Chinese, right? Like the small feet, that's like where that kind of comes from, and being able to reclaim that stories, I feel like is really important, for sure.
Yeah. Like, I feel like maybe that's also part of the Asian American part of me, because I know when I was younger, I wasn't really interested in my Filipino heritage.
Mm-hmm.
I was just trying to be American. And now that I've grown up and I'm much older, I find myself trying to search for my culture, and I want to take that in, and I want to teach it to my children, and so that they will know their own Filipino culture as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you think there's a lot of intersections as well between the different Asian American cultures?
I mean, the difficulty is, like, we're in this weird COVID time, so there's a lot of division right now. But what I do know, I will say this: we at Pixar, we do have a POC group of story artists that get together, and it's got different Asian groups, different all. I mean, actually, not just Asian, but all people of color in our group. So if there is any division, we're trying to break that and come together and tell more of our stories, and try to push each other to tell our stories out there.
What do you think the importance of creativity is during like these times? So like COVID times, a lot of people are stuck at home, probably picked up new hobbies. Like, how important do you think creativity is during these times?
I think it is the utmost importance. I think people will realize that now, because after the first week you get bored and you're like, what am I going to do? I'll watch TV. And then a lot of people started watching, watching a bunch of series, and they start reading books and start listening to music. And that's all art. I mean, people think it's not essential, but it is. It feeds our soul, and we need that. And sure, it's not food, but well, it's food for your soul. At least that's what I'd like to think. And that's And now that during these COVID times, there's been a uptick in animation, because we can still continue to work. Versus live action, for instance. Live action, they have to shut down, and they can't film right now. But animators and us creators, artists, we can work from home and still create these great things that are coming out. And but yeah, like, I think these COVID times have proven art is super essential.
Mm-hmm. How do you think your collaboration process has changed then?
Because of COVID, or because of Float, or
in both.
Okay. For Float, it has changed because I got to go to the director chair, and I got to see. Usually, I'm just one part of the equation of the whole pipeline, and as long as I got my share done, I wasn't really concerned about the rest. Really, but now, when I was on Float, I got to see the whole process, and I got to work with animators, I got to work with lighters, I got to work with musicians and editors, and so it made it more of a collaborative process. Not that story isn't, but it's just, you're still within the story. Artists versus seeing the whole studio. And so I guess you just have a wider scope. And as far as COVID is concerned, how does that broaden my view? Maybe it's because I'm talking to you guys right now. You guys, where are you in Hong Kong? And that is amazing. Well, I don't. Usually we would have to fly out there, or and maybe usually you would have to see me at some event and like try to talk to me then. But now we're just Skyping and having a conversation, and that is nuts. That is crazy. But it's great because now we're connected, and just seconds away from each other.
How do you think the stories people tell now will be different then? Now that they have access to all these cultures, like even more so, it's more popular, like instantaneously. I guess we have these calls, right?
Yeah. I think it'll change in that hopefully we'll get more authentic stories and more research stories, because there's no excuse anymore. You could type in and talk about, like, for instance, Eskrima. You could type in Eskrima and get all this information about it. You can actually contact an Eskrima master and talk to him or her about it. Whereas that was different prior to the internet. I remember when I was much younger, I had to wait to go to the Comic-Con in order to see artists that I liked. But now I could go to Instagram and see their art whenever, and I probably could contact them whenever. And instead of waiting all summer long, waiting for the next summer to come along for me to talk to them. So yeah, these times and the internet has changed a lot of things. It made us so much closer and so much access to different things all across the world.
Cool. I guess that leads into, like, we have a few rapid fire questions that we're planning on putting on our digital blog just separately. Can you list like 3 animation artists that we should watch out for this year?
3 animation artists you should watch out for this year. I would think of Enrico Casarosa because his movie is coming out. That is Luca. Let's see what else. What else is coming out this year? Everything else from Pixar, I think I gotta be quiet about. So I'm like trying to think of things that are outside of Pixar. You're gonna have to. I can't think of anything else because I'm so focused on Pixar right now.
Or maybe like your inspirations for like the ones that you look up to or that you work closely with.
Off the top of my head, my buddy Dean Kelly, he's a story artist, and he is working on Lightyear with me. You could check out his Instagram, and also now that I'm thinking about it, both my buddy Dean Kelly and I were from Avatar: The Last Airbender. So now that Mike and Brian have announced that they're doing the Avatar studio, they're ones to look out for too. So Brian DiMartino, Dante, I think that's his name. See, I'm terrible sometimes with names. Sometimes that's why I don't even say their last names.
Yeah.
So it's, but I know Mike and Brian Konecko. So
Okay.
just look up Avatar. You guys will know.
Yeah, okay. So I love Avatar. I like grew up watching that. I think it was.
Okay, then what are their names? Tell me.
Mike, Dante, and I think the other one is. Oh no, I can't remember.
Yeah, Brian Konecko, but
yeah, it's so inspiring to be able to have seen like those Asian stories, I guess, even growing up, because it is like they're like Asian looking as well, and they use like Chinese characters and stuff like that. I just kind of want to bring it back because now that I think of a question, do you think it was what do you think the process has been for you, like comparing Avatar and like being able to tell the stories of like Asian characters versus like working on like other Pixar blockbusters like Up?
Luckily in Up there was that Korean kid, but I understand what you're saying. It's funny because like when you're an Asian American, you're used to working on characters that don't look like you, and that's sad to say.
Yeah.
But I'm used to that, so it didn't bug me. But when I do get the opportunity to work on characters that do look like me, I jump for joy and I thoroughly enjoy the moment because this is rare. And like, yeah, luckily in Up there was the Korean kid, there was Russell, but Incredibles, I think Edna's Japanese or half Japanese, so but there is some representation. Not a lot,
Yeah.
but there is.
It's getting a lot better now, though, I think.
Yeah.
Raya
And with Float, there's
Oh,
two
yeah.
lead characters, Filipino-American
Yeah.
lead characters, so that's already a step in the right direction.
yeah.
Definitely.
Are there any Asian American short films that you would recommend as well? Maybe like 2 or 3.
Asian American short films. Well, there's Ed Wynn's Loop, that's out. Not Loop, that's Erica's. Ed Wynn's is Wind.
Yeah.
That's the Ed Wynn's. I guess Donnie's, which is Bao, and then who else is Asian? And then Rosie Sullivan, she's half. Hers is Kitbull. So those are the 3.
Okay.
And they're all Spark shorts.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I think I've watched all of them.
Yeah, me too. What are your most used software recommendations? So like you have different stages of kind of like storytelling. So you have like the concept, the writing, the animation itself. Like what are your most used softwares for each stage of your creative process?
I don't know if I could tell what some of our stuff is Pixar related, and so I can't say those. But I mean, looking at you guys right now, I'm talking through my MacBook Pro, and I have a monitor here and a Wacom tablet, and I have an iPad. So those are things that I use very often. But I don't think the programs that I use, I think they're Pixar related, and I can't really tell you which those are.
Is there any that you could recommend, I don't know, as like to anyone starting out? What kind of like sage advice would you give?
Any like programs, or what are you talking about?
Yeah, programs and thereafter as well.
Yeah.
I suppose like I tend to use right now, I'm using Photoshop a lot, and I'm using Procreate. So I guess you could start there. And I think a lot of people are using those as well. At least when I'm on Instagram, I see a lot of people mentioning those 2 products.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
taking this call.
Oh, you're welcome.